What if a single birthday celebration could reshape a nation's politics, economy, and global standing? On July 4, 2026, the United States marked its 250th anniversary, and the festivities that followed reverberated far beyond fireworks and parades, igniting policy reforms, cultural reckonings, and geopolitical shifts that would define the next decade. The first spark came from the unprecedented federal budget earmarked for the Jubilee. Congress passed the Bicentennial Enhancement Act, allocating $1.2 billion for nationwide infrastructure upgrades, historic preservation, and educational programs. Simultaneously, the Department of Education launched the America 250 curriculum, mandating a comprehensive study of the nation's founding, slavery, indigenous displacement, and civil rights movements. By the start of the 2027 school year, more than 14 million students across 48 states were enrolled in the program, prompting a surge in textbook sales that lifted the publishing industry's revenue by 8% and prompting historians to publish over 200 new scholarly works on previously underrepresented narratives. The cultural sector responded with a wave of commemorative art. The National Endowment for the Arts boosted grants by 35%, resulting in the commissioning of 1,200 public murals, 500 community theater productions, and 300 musical performances that collectively attracted 12 million attendees. A less obvious but equally profound shift occurred in the political arena. The Jubilee's emphasis on unity prompted a bipartisan American Accord in the Senate, a rare compromise that lowered the federal corporate tax rate from 21% to 18% while simultaneously increasing the progressive income tax brackets. The move, championed by Senator Lisa Murkowski and Representative Rashida Tlaib, was projected by the Congressional Budget Office to add $150 billion to the federal deficit over 10 years, but supporters argued the resulting stimulus would generate $300 billion in private sector growth, a claim later substantiated by GDP data showing a 0.7% annual increase from 2026 to 2028. The tax reform spurred a wave of corporate relocations. Over 200 million square feet of office space, representing roughly 4% of the nation's commercial real estate, shifted from coastal hubs to secondary cities such as Nashville, Columbus, and Boise. Companies cited the lower tax burden, improved infrastructure funded by the Jubilee, and a more favorable quality of life index. The relocation contributed to a 2.3% rise in median household income in those regions, narrowing the national wage gap from 15% to 11% within 3 years. Internationally, the 250th birthday was leveraged as a diplomatic tool. The State Department organized Freedom Fest tours to 15 allied nations, showcasing American music, technology, and democratic ideals. In South Korea, a joint concert with K-pop groups drew 80 million television viewers, bolstering U.S. In turn, the United Kingdom and Canada signed a trilateral trade amendment that reduced tariffs on agricultural products by 9%, opening $4.5 billion in new market opportunities for Midwest farmers. The Jubilee also accelerated the United States climate agenda. The Climate Action Celebration Act, signed by President Elena Martinez on July 4, mandated a 50% reduction in coal-generated electricity by 2035, a timeline 5 years ahead of the original target. The law triggered a rapid decommissioning of 12 coal plants, the construction of 30 gigawatts of solar and wind capacity, and a 20% drop in national carbon emissions by 2029, surpassing the Paris Agreement commitments and positioning the U.S. as the world's largest renewable energy exporter. Energy policy changes sparked a boom in battery manufacturing. The Department of Energy awarded $500 million in grants to firms in Nevada, Texas, and Georgia to develop next-generation lithium-ion cells. By 2028, domestic battery production rose from 12 gigawatt-hours to 45 gigawatt-hours annually, cutting imports from China by 68% and creating 22,000 high-skill jobs. The ripple effect lowered electric vehicle prices by 15%, accelerating EV adoption to 40% of new car sales by 2030. Within 6 months, Congress allocated an additional $2 billion for tribal hospitals, reduced health disparities by 12%, and prompted the Department of the Interior to return 1.3 million acres of land in the Southwest to Pueblo peoples, marking the largest land restitution in U.S. history. The celebration also ignited a wave of legislative action on voting rights. The 250th Amendment to the Constitution, proposed by Representative John Ossoff and passed by a two-thirds Senate majority, clarified the federal government's authority to enforce uniform voting standards. The amendment led to the passage of the Election Integrity Act of 2027, which standardized mail-in ballot procedures, funded statewide voter registration drives, and reduced the average time to count ballots from 10 days to 3 days. Voter turnout in the 2028 presidential election rose to 71%, the highest rate since 1960. Economic data showed that the Jubilee spending boost had a multiplier effect across sectors. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reported that every dollar of federal Jubilee funding generated $1.84 in private sector activity by the end of 2027, surpassing the typical $1.55 multiplier for infrastructure projects. The surge in consumer confidence, measured by the University of Michigan Index, climbed from 88.2 in early 2026 to 95.6 by late 2027, indicating a sustained optimism that translated into a 3.2% increase in retail sales. The media landscape transformed as well. The 250th anniversary prompted the launch of America 250, a multinational, multi-platform news initiative funded by a coalition of public broadcasters, private networks, and tech firms. Within its first year, the initiative produced over 5,000 original stories, reached an estimated 250 million viewers worldwide, and won 12 Emmy Awards for investigative journalism on topics ranging from gun violence to climate change. Its success prompted the Federal Communications Commission to allocate $150 million for public interest broadcasting, a historic increase. A notable technological milestone emerged from the celebration's emphasis on innovation. The National Science Foundation awarded a $250 million Jubilee Innovation Grant to a consortium of universities developing quantum-resistant cryptography. By 2029, the new algorithms were integrated into the Department of Defense's secure communications, protecting an estimated 3 billion data transactions daily and positioning the United States as a leader in post-quantum cybersecurity. The Jubilee's impact on immigration policy was equally profound. In response to the heightened national dialogue about the nation's founding ideals, the Department of Homeland Security announced the Pathways to Citizenship program, granting a streamlined residency track to 150,000 undocumented workers who had been employed for at least 5 years and demonstrated community ties. The program reduced the backlog in immigration courts by 22% and contributed an additional $12 billion in annual tax revenues, according to the Treasury's Office of Tax Analysis. Education and workforce development intersected with the Jubilee's focus on future readiness. The Department of Labor's America Skills Initiative, funded by a $300 million portion of the Jubilee budget, created apprenticeship pipelines in advanced manufacturing, renewable energy, and artificial intelligence. By 2028, 180,000 apprentices completed certifications, and employer surveys reported a 27% reduction in skill gaps, enhancing the nation's competitiveness in the global market. The arts sector's revival spurred a measurable improvement in public health. A study by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention linked increased participation in community arts events to a 4% decline in reported anxiety disorders in urban neighborhoods that hosted over 100 Jubilee-related performances. The correlation prompted city planners to embed cultural venues into future urban development plans, allocating $45 million for new community centers in Detroit, New Orleans, and Albuquerque. A surprising consequence unfolded in the realm of space exploration. The Jubilee's patriotic fervor inspired a renewed public interest in the final frontier, prompting NASA to accelerate the Artemis 4 mission timeline. The agency secured an additional $1.4 billion from the federal budget, enabling the launch of the Lunar Gateway earlier in 2028 and the establishment of the first permanent research outpost on the Moon by 2030, a milestone that reinforced American leadership in space amidst rising competition from China and the European Space Agency. The celebration also reshaped the nation's legal landscape. The Supreme Court, citing the spirit of unity expressed in the Jubilee speeches, issued a landmark decision in United States v. Environmental Advocates, 2027, that affirmed the federal government's authority to enforce nationwide environmental standards despite states' claims of sovereignty. The ruling paved the way for the Clean Air Restoration Act of 2028, which mandated a 30% reduction in nitrogen oxides emissions from industrial plants by 2035, a target reached 3 years ahead of schedule. In the realm of finance, the Jubilee catalyzed the rise of patriotic bonds, a new class of Treasury securities marketed as a way for citizens to invest directly in the nation's future. Within 6 months of issuance, $85 billion in patriotic bonds were sold, outpacing the previous record for Treasury inflows. The bonds funded the construction of 1.2 million affordable housing units, reducing the national homelessness rate from 0.68% to 0.55% by 2029. The 250th birthday also prompted a re-evaluation of the nation's military posture. The Department of Defense, citing the Jubilee's call for defending liberty at home and abroad, released the Strategic Realignment Plan, which reallocated $15 billion from overseas bases to cyber defense and domestic resilience programs. The shift led to the creation of 10 new cyber units, each staffed with 500 specialists, and a 19% increase in cyber incident response capacity, safeguarding critical infrastructure against ransomware attacks that had risen by 42% between 2024 and 2026. A final, subtle transformation emerged in the collective American psyche. Surveys conducted by the Gallup organization in the month following the Jubilee showed that the proportion of citizens who identified national pride as a core personal value rose from 62% to 78%, the highest level recorded since the post-World War II era. This surge in patriotism correlated with increased volunteerism, as non-profit organizations reported a 16% uptick in volunteer hours, reinforcing social cohesion and community resilience across the country. From fireworks over the Potomac to policy papers in Washington, the 250th birthday of the United States proved more than a ceremonial milestone. It became a catalyst that reshaped infrastructure, education, culture, climate action, and global influence. The echoes of that July 4th celebration continue to reverberate, reminding future generations that a single day of reflection can ignite a cascade of change that reshapes a nation's destiny.